All right, so welcome everyone to Scholars Choice's monthly educational webinar. My name's Reagan and I'll be your host for this evening's call. I'd just like to take a moment, actually, while you guys are all just starting to come onto the call and explain why Scholars Choice hosts these calls. So Scholars Choice, for many of you that already know who are fans of the company and are frequent visitors, they're built on a commitment to create and encourage educational excellence. So we believe that it's important for parents and teachers to be able to access resources and become really empowered and inspired to educate our future generations to excel, attain more, and just really be happy. As parents and teachers and neighbors, grandparents of young ones, we're all working towards this goal together, and at Scholars Choice's hope that resources like these educational webinars and this whole series, even the other resources that we offer online, like our blog, can really help the youth in our lives. So I'm just going to give a few tips as well to remind everybody coming on this call how to make it really successful and run smoothly for you. You'll notice that you are on mute. This is just for the sake of keeping background noise low. Everybody will remain on mute throughout the whole call, but we do encourage you to ask questions throughout. So to ask a question, you can just go over to your GoToWebinar dashboard and you'll see a chat drop-down option. If you pop that one open, it should open up a chat box, and we can just test it out right now for anybody that is just arriving. If you want to just shoot me a line and say hello, we'll make sure it's working for you. We'll just give a minute to see if any of these are coming in. All right, perfect. They're all starting to pour in. All these hellos. Hi back to you. Awesome. All right, looks like everybody is having no trouble with that. Perfect. So throughout, as you ask questions, you're welcome to just go to your dashboard, pop them in there, and we'll get to as many as we can during, if it's appropriate, to kind of toss them in, or right at the end of the webinar. And those that we don't get to, don't worry, because we will do a follow-up blog in a couple of weeks' time that will address all of your questions that Judy will professionally and personally respond to. Okay, great. So everybody that is just coming onto the call, welcome again to Discipline Without Distress. This is Tools to Raising Caring Kids While Maintaining Calm. And we have the honor of having a very special guest expert with us tonight. So allow me to introduce to you Judy Arnall. She's one of Canada's leading professional speakers on non-punitive, respectful parenting and family relationships. On top of being a professional member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, a distinguished member of Toastmasters, and a certified Canadian family life educator, Judy's also the best-selling author of multiple books, including the very popular Discipline Without Distress, which has been translated now into 5 languages. So Judy, welcome to this call. I believe everybody is just looking at your beautiful first slide here. Actually, it looks like we're being shown a slide featuring your family as well. So not only are you accredited and educated in this field, but you pack the solid first-hand experience of raising multiple children as well, right?
Yes, I hope so.
So I'm really glad that you chose to join us tonight. This is such an important topic to all of the parents and even teachers out there as well that are obviously very eager to understand more about this. And I will just pass it off to you and let you take it away.
Thank you, Reagan. It's such an honor to be here tonight, and I hope to provide the audience members with a little information about child development. And my job as an educator is to read research, go to conferences, find out information, and then give the information to parents. And your job as parents and teachers is to decide if that information fits for you and your family. So you know your family best. And I just want to say this is copyright Professional Parenting Canada, but permission is given to Scholars Choice for use as the webinar. So where do I get my information from? I get it from the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Alberta Health Services, and from a parenting program called Parent Effectiveness Training, which has celebrated 50 years in existence last year. So I think parenting and teaching young children is one of the hardest jobs on earth. In no other occupation are you given so much responsibility, and in the case of parenting, there's not a whole lot of training out there, and they certainly don't come with an owner's manual. So I think parents and teachers, you should have a tip jar. This is an example of a tip jar I put out on my kitchen table once, and I got a few pennies and nickels, and one time I even got a chocolate bar, so it was great. But it's a very, very hard job, and especially dealing with young children. That's probably the job where you get the least sleep, and it requires the most hands-on, patient reaction to parent and raise them well. So in tonight's episode, I'm going to talk about discipline. And you've probably heard the term positive discipline. Now, what is positive discipline as opposed to negative discipline? All positive discipline is teaching children without physical and emotional punishment. It's that simple. And sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world. I'll have to tell you, I am a realist because although I teach parenting, I know the research, but coming home and applying it in my house is sometimes very challenging. So just to introduce, I have 4 boys. They range in age from 11 to 22, and I have a daughter who's she's the princess in the middle, and she's 18. So right now I have 3 older children who are young adults, and they're off to university. And I have to walk my talk. I think the fact that I have to teach positive discipline has in many ways stopped me from spanking my own kids when I really felt I wanted to. So I'll be honest with you, it's challenging, but when my oldest son was 10 years old, I gave up all punishments. And I'm talking everything from consequences to, I only spanked once, to timeouts to everything. So my youngest 3 children have never ever been punished at all. And I have to tell you, it's been wonderful in the teen years and in the young adult years in terms of their ability to have conversations, to their confidence levels, and their ability to practice conflict resolution. So if I didn't believe it was possible, I wouldn't be telling parents and teachers that this is something you really, really can do. So why do we need to use positive discipline? Their world has certainly changed from 20 to 30 years ago, or when we were raised as children. Nowadays, children play in a sandbox that is quite invisible to their parents and caregivers, and it's called the internet. So back in the olden days when we had neighbors and friends and relatives to look out for our children, and they would be the other parents in their lives, now so much of our children's interaction is underground and invisible. So we've lost much of our ability to supervise and keep them safe and control what they do. And that's a huge change. In light of that change, what we need to do is focus more on building relationships with children. And we want to be their lifeline when they're out there in their new world and they need us for help, or they need to talk to us, or we don't want them to be afraid to come to us anymore. We want to be there for them. This chart kind of shows you the difference. So 30 years ago, we would say you have to respect your elders just because they were bigger than you and because many times we feared them. Nowadays, We need to respect our parents and children, but it's a respect based on mutualness and lending adult knowledge, experience, and building open communication. And that is the focus of parenting nowadays, is to build relationships with children rather than constantly try and gain good behavior. So everything is connected. In our parenting groups, when I teach parents, I ask them 2 questions. I say, what are the qualities you want to see in your relationship with your teenager? And very often they don't have teens, they have toddlers. And I say, okay, pick your most challenging child. Fast forward ahead, imagine that child at age 16. What are qualities you want in your relationship? And then we do another list and we brainstorm, okay, what are some behaviors that are driving you nuts right now? And that's a pretty long list usually. So these are some things that people come up with. In regards to relationship, they want open communication. They want their teenagers to spend time with them, come to them for problems, have fun together, because we're not in parenting for the money, that's for sure, and to listen to their advice. And some of the behaviors, well, the list could go on and on and on. And we say, okay, so this on the left-hand side is our goal. This is what we are working towards. And on the right-hand side are the obstacles that we deal with now. And there's many, many, many right ways to parent, and a few not so right ways. But ask yourself, is what you're doing now to get control of the items on the right going to get you the items on the left down the road? In many terms, we think of short-run goals. And our short-run goals are, we want to stop the behavior, we want to make the child listen, and if we're really honest with ourselves, we're angry. And we want to relieve our anger. This kind of shows you a picture of my 2 oldest sons when I put them down for a nap. And it wasn't a good day. So we tend to get focused on short-run goals. When we're disciplined, we want to focus on long-run goals. So what are we doing to teach our kids to discipline them, but create connection and belonging in the family, to teach self-control, social, emotional, and life skills, and building their brains? What are we doing to build the long-run goals? A positive approach is always better than a negative one. So we know from studies in the workplace with employer-employee relationships that people who feel good about themselves and their jobs want to please their employers. They want to do better. And this is no different at home. Children are the same way. Children who feel good about themselves want to do better. They want to please adults. Current research shows that punishments interferes with learning. It can cause worse behavior. It teaches kids how to punish others, and you see that very often in sibling relationships. It can cause the child stress, and it risks the relationships. Yet, 85% of parents still do use some form of punishment. Why? Because in the moment they either lack the tools to use positive discipline, but it also involves consciously changing what they're going to do. There is no research out there that shows long-term benefits to using punishment. And there's a lot of research that shows it risks the relationship. So what is discipline? Well, discipline is basically moving willpower and control to an outer form of control, to an inner self-control. So when we say a person is disciplined, say an adult, what we mean is they have a good sense of willpower. They may be a person who studies instead of parties, to learn instead of tune out in class. And we all know people who can go to the gym instead of lingering on social media or eat their vegetables instead of that piece of cake. Those are disciplined people, and we all have a degree of discipline within us. Some of us have more self-control, others have less. And that's all discipline is teaching children self-control. We know from the famous marshmallow research test that was done in the 60s at Stanford University, where a whole room of 4-year-olds were given a marshmallow and told that if they waited 5 minutes, when the researchers went out of the room and came back in, they would get a second marshmallow. And these are 4-year-olds, and about half of the room could not do it. They could not have the self-control to stop eating the marshmallow. So that kind of puts it into perspective whether we really we can understand when 2-year-olds don't have self-control to not touch things or to share their belongings. We often hear, "I was spanked and I'm okay." And that's a very common phrase. And it's probably true. We are okay. We're functionally okay. I know when I was growing up, my parents had a little wooden board hanging in the kitchen, and it was called the Board of Education. And I consider myself pretty functional. But we also want to look at what could have I been? What could have been the optimum upbringing that I could have had? Now, if I can convince you to use positive discipline based on building relationships, maybe I can talk a little bit about brain development. If you build relationships, it helps children build their brains. In terms of spanking right now, there are 400 Canadian health organizations that have signed the Joint Statement on Physical Punishment of Children and Youth, advocating for the repeal of spanking as a discipline tool. And as I said with the research, the Canadian Medical Association even came out last year, I think it was, in favor of pushing education for parents on how to discipline without spanking. So let's look a little bit about parenting styles. We all bring things from our family of origin to our parenting and teaching. And there are better styles than others, although we're not all one all the time. That's unrealistic. But we tend to be, and our partner tends to be one or the other most of the time. So this is based on 2 axes. One is expectations and structure, which is a very important component of parenting. And the other one is nurturing and warmth, which is also an important component of parenting. Nurturing and warmth includes expressing love, offering comfort, kindness, attention, security, emotional validation, non-sexual touch, listening, protection, and it's not using punishment. Structure is what children need too, and what that is it encompasses allowing age-appropriate decisions, natural consequences, giving guidance, teaching, setting family rules and limits together, having routines, having rituals and celebrations, providing supervision and monitoring, and reasonable age-appropriate expectations. So on the top right-hand corner is what we call the democratic style, and that has high expectations and structure and high nurturing and warmth. That style has the best outcomes for children. On the top left-hand side of the axis is what we call the authoritarian parenting style, which can be a lot of high expectations and structure, but low on the nurturing and warmth. On the bottom right-hand corner is the indulgent parenting style, and that can have a high component of nurturing and warmth, but lower on expectations and structure. And in the bottom left-hand corner is uninvolved, and that's not much of anything. So it's okay to not be democratic all the time. There are times when we're more authoritarian, such as in issues of safety, or maybe your mother-in-law is visiting. There are times where you might be more indulgent, and those are times when you're sick, when your child's sick, when you're vacationing, and that's okay too. So aim to be democratic about 70% of the time, and you're probably doing fine as a parenting style. The hardest one is when you oscillate between authoritarian and indulgent too much. That can be very confusing to children. So let's talk a little bit about brain development. When babies are born, they have 100 billion brain cells, and not many of the cells are connected between each other yet. Only some basic cells to keep the heart and the lungs going. And what connects the neurons, or the brain cells, after birth are positive interactive experiences with parents, teachers, and caregivers. So children develop in 4 areas: physical, cognitive, social, and emotional. And there are some cognitive limitations that are unique to children. They're egocentric till about school age. So the world revolves around them, and that is not a discipline issue, that's a development issue. They have black and white thinking. They have amazing magical thinking getting into the preschool years, and they have very, very poor impulse control. And that kind of explains when parents say to me, they tell their 2-year-old, no, don't touch, and the 2-year-old's looking at them and smiling and pushing their finger towards the forbidden item. And it's almost like they can't stop. They have to touch and learn to see what will happen. And that's pretty normal behavior for toddlers. Children also have a sense of omnipotence and grandiosity. So they can do everything. They can do it all. And they have no time sense or ability to plan. I remember when my 4-year-old would say, what does hurry up actually mean? After I've said it for years, hurry, hurry, we got to get going. And they don't have that time sense that we do. So in terms of development, let's look at babies. They're in a being stage of development. Now the brain develops almost from the back to the front, and from the back of it on upwards. So they're in a stage where they're just feeling sensory input and output. They're hungry, they cry. They're cold, they cry. And in that whole first 6 months, we're working on building attachment and trust that they're going to have their needs met. Young toddlers are in the doing stage, which is 6 to 18 months. Their whole job and their whole brain is organized to explore. And they explore with 5 senses. So hearing, taste, touch, whatever the other ones are. And that's why they put things in their mouths, and they have to touch everything. Even if you say, no, don't touch, their brain drives them to do that. And that's their learning. That's good. That grows their brain. Older toddlers, the part of their brain now that is especially sensitive is the feeling stage. And that's the stage where they're starting to explode in temper tantrums. That's 18 months to 3 years. They have incredibly intense feelings, and they express them through body language, which is what we call tantrums. They're very independent, but not. That oscillates between wanting to feel very secure and dependent on you too. Hitting, pushing, and biting and saying no are very common behaviors for that stage, and it's them trying to get a bit of independence. And that's their job description. They do that. They have no self-control. They're very honest, active, short attention span, no logic. They are not logical. So logical consequences will not work on them, and they're limited verbal ability. For preschoolers, they're in a thinking stage. So this is kind of a characteristic of their brain development now, where they ask a lot of questions. They're starting to put two and two together. Why is the sky blue? Where does the garbage go when it goes out the door? They want to know things, but they're very, very limited to their perceptions. This 40 is a very critical number. What that means is that children under age 6, when you ask them to do something, they'll comply about 40% of the time. That means it's totally normal that for 60% of the time, they're not going to listen to you or comply. And that is appropriate. That is normal just because of their egocentricity, their lack of time. They will get that later. And if one thing you get from tonight is to remember that what the most common mistake parents make is that they look at behaviors in these years and they think, I have to address that now. I have to nip it in the bud, or it's going to snowball down to the teenager stage. And that is not true. It's a stage. Children do get better at complying and listening to you, and even more so if your relationship's a good one. So these are some characteristics of preschoolers' age. So they can whine, they're active, they're learning how to use their power. Who has power, who doesn't? I remember my son went to kindergarten and he came home one day and he was mad at me and he said, Mommy, you are not coming to my birthday party. And I was going, yay, that's one less party I have to organize. But that's the way he learned how to use power at kindergarten, and he was trying it out at home. So that's what they do. They're learning who has power and how to use it. They have incredible imaginations, and that's a offshoot of their brain development. That's good. But it also translates into fears and heightened fantasy. And they're a little more cooperative than toddlers, but they still have a short attention span. And that's why a lot of school isn't mandatory until age 6, because a lot of preschoolers need to catch, or not catch up, but they don't have the attention span that school requires. And their verbal abilities are just emerging. Now, just quickly go through school agers. This is a time where they're starting to develop their logic, and they understand things that are concrete and tangible, things in their environment. They can cooperate and listen about 60% of the time. And this is where you're going to do most of your discipline. They're going to make mistakes, they're going to ask questions, they're going to learn to argue at this stage. And this is a nice stage because they have enough brain power to reason. Back in the preschooler stage, you're pretty well just doing damage control. Preschoolers and toddlers, you're keeping them safe, you're keeping your stuff safe. Damage control. This is where you can really start to teach. Although in preschoolers' age, you can teach, but without the expectation that they're always going to comply. Here, you can have that expectation they're going to comply. So this is some characteristics of school agers. The main ones here is that they're becoming really good negotiators, and that's where problem solving kicks in. And the last one is teenagers. They're going through a stage quite similar to the toddler years, where they're learning identity, separation, and experimenting with sexuality. And that's 13 to 19 years. They can think abstractly, and again, that feeling part of their brain is heightened, and it's learning to handle their emotions. These are some characteristics of teenagers, but at this point, you, as a parent or teacher, you're more of a coach a facilitator and a mentor at this stage. And you want to keep that relationship going so they come to you. There's a last stage of childhood called emerging adulthood, and that's the last part of the brain to develop, which is the prefrontal cortex. And that's where all the executive function is, the reasoning, the ability to plan, the decision makings, the really complex problem solving is there. And about age 25, that's, although our brains never fully, totally are complete, it is where most of childhood is developed. So childhood is a long time. When you look at that in 25 years out of a lifespan of 80, that's a long time. They're still learning. And they keep going through these stages back and forth. This kind of fits well with Jean Piaget's cognitive development. Pretty well the same stages, and he was a researcher back in the 50s, 60s. And now that we know more about developing brains, we see he's still quite being on in terms of learning what children know, what they can handle. So positive discipline builds brains. How? Well, we know that children thrive on what we call serve and return, which is a nurturing and attentive adult response. So when a child asks a question or speaks something to an adult and an adult responds back and then the child responds, that's a good thing. That builds brain cells and connections between the neurons. So genes are a blueprint for building children's foundations. Now, whether certain genes are turned on or not are based on positive and negative experiences. And nurturing, that part I talked about in parenting styles, is what builds the wiring, the walls, the plumbing of the house. So if we can start with a good foundation, children are healthy, we can mold a really good house and their brains. I want to talk a bit about stress. So positive discipline doesn't add stress to a child. It actually helps. There's three kinds of stress that we all feel. There's positive stress. Positive stress are things like a birthday party coming up or a holiday. It's very motivational. It moves us to do things. For example, this webinar was a bit of positive stress for me in that I was looking forward to it. It was coming up, but it motivated me to put together some PowerPoints. And once we do it, we get over it. It builds our resiliency. We feel good that we did it. It's done. Yay. Looking forward to the next one. Tolerable stress is a little different. It is usually an unpleasant event, but it's not ongoing. It happens, it subsides, and it's buffered by caring people and support systems. It's kind of like a golf ball. You can bounce, but it's hard. It's a hard bounce. Toxic stress is prolonged stress. It's unrelenting, it's unpredictable, and it can cause long-term damage to brain cells. So what happens in the brain is brains form pathways between each other by sending neurotransmitters over gaps between each cells. So the gaps are also called synapses. So the neurotransmitters get transported across and build pathways. And the more positive experiences the child has with adults and caregivers and toys and learning experiences, the more pathways they build. And that's a good thing for brains. After about age 6, children start pruning pathways in their brains because they strengthen the ones that are used a lot, and just like a tree, you have to make room for the bigger stuff. Cortisol is a what we call the stress hormone, and that's released along with adrenaline during stress. So ongoing stress can damage neurons. There's a lot of evidence coming out that's showing that. So how does this relate to discipline? Discipline that's unpredictable or prolonged can be stressful to a child. There are some studies and evidence out there that spanking or regular punishments can cause stress. But I think it's important to keep it in perspective. Is it rarely or is it regularly? The odd time you may have lost it and spanked your child is not going to doom them forever. But if a child's regularly spanked or regularly isolated from parents, that may raise the risk of toxic stress. There are many benefits of giving up punishments. There's less hostility from children. There's almost no attitude or rebellion because they know they can work things out with parents and caregivers. The child accesses the parents for help. There's no fear there. If there's no fear of a consequence or punishment, then a child will go and ask for help when they're vulnerable. There's less stress and illness, and a child has more responsibility and fate control. And children often have better social skills and are practiced in communication, problem solving, and conflict resolution. And those are life skills they're going to need for later on down the road. Temperament is another personality factor we have to look at. I'm sure you can tell by this picture, which is my most spirited child. I had 3 of them. Temperament is something we're all born with, and about 40% of all babies are born easygoing. About 30% are born slow to warm, and about 15% are born what we call high need or spirited children. In the past, they've been called other things like the strong-willed child or the stubborn child, and they're not really that way. The characteristic that people perceive as stubborn and strong-willed is called persistence. And persistence is probably that one characteristic that drives parents badly. It's also related to distractibility. But persistence in the early years, when you say to a child, no, you can't have that chocolate bar, and they ask you 20 more times, and then you say no again, and they ask you 20 more times. By the end of the day, it can be very challenging to have patience. Believe me. Here are some more temperament traits that can challenge parents. Their intensity, so their temper tantrums can really last a long time, up to an hour or more. Their first reaction to surprises or change is usually very negative, and they can change their moods in minutes. Now there's 8 temperament traits, but I'm not going to go through the other ones just because these are the ones that really relate to discipline. Now, temperament is what children are born with. It stays with them all their lives, and it is on a continuum. So if children have about 5 out of 8 of the characteristics, they are what we call a spirited child. And spirited children are like parenting teenagers when they're 2. They have their own sense of direction and determination, and that's wonderful to see when they're 2, when they're teens, but not so much when they're 2. So you're kind of just along for the ride to keep them safe, but they do have special needs. So you want to have very few rules, very few, but they're rules that you're willing to go to the wall for. So what are 3 simple steps to positive discipline? These will work for any child. Number 1, you have to get yourself calm. Number 2, then you get your child calm. And number 3, then you solve the problem. So get yourself calm, get your child calm, solve the problem. The hardest part is us and getting ourselves calm. If we got enough sleep, I think half of all discipline problems would go away. They wouldn't be problems anymore. But it's very hard. Now, we're supposed to be the models of self-control. If we're teaching self-control to our little ones, we have to at least exhibit self-control ourselves. And what that means is getting a grip on our feelings. So timeout is a good tool for getting ourselves calm. Now, there are many times you feel angry in parenting. When they put that little 7-pound baby in your arms and you think, I would just die for this little baby, you can't think ahead to how many times in parenting that you can feel really angry at this little wonder. But it's true. We all feel anger, and it's okay to feel it. Feelings are on the inside, and they're all acceptable. Behaviors are on the outside, and there's limits on behavior. So we want to do something, recognize we're angry, take a break, and put the child in a safe place and get a grip ourselves. I'm going to use this example because it's an example of defiance, and there's nothing that brings out the hardest part of parenting and using positive discipline is in the face of when our children are defiant to ourselves. That's when parents tend to bring out the big guns. Parents who don't spank can spank. So this was an example when my son was 4 years old, and he came to me before dinner with a big bag of chips. And he said, Mommy, can I have the chips? And I said, no, dear, it's right before supper. And he was angry. So when you say no to kids, they're going to push back. They're going to feel unhappy, and it's okay to feel unhappy. But what this little boy did was he went up to his room, he opened the bag of chips, spilled them all over the carpet, and took his foot and crunched every last chip into that white carpet. And because he's quite spirited, he made sure every chip was crunched. So, step one, get myself calm. Now, when the room goes quiet, you come up and you say, okay, what are they doing? So I came up and I saw the chips all over his carpet. Was I angry? Of course I was angry. I was livid. Not only had I said no, this is what he did in return. So at that point, I could have very easily spanked him, but I didn't. At that point, I took my time out. I said to him, I'm really angry. I'm going downstairs, and I'm going to have a timeout. That's what I did. It was one of those moments I was very proud of in parenting. So if you separate your anger from your discipline, you don't do anything you'll regret later, and you don't say or issue consequences that you know you're never going to follow through. You know, I could have said, that's it. You're grounded from your GameCube or your Wii for 2 weeks. And I know I would never follow through on that. And that's not good because they start to know you're not going to follow through. So I left for a few minutes and I got calm myself. So there's many tools we all like to use to calm down. These are some of them. Everybody has their own special type of tool. For example, some of the tools that are purple are nurturing ways to calm down. Eat a snack, get a hug, be alone, drink from a water bottle. The yellow cards are ways that you can calm down physically. Some of those are my favorite, like vacuuming or cleaning counters or loading the dishwasher. I usually do that when I'm mad because it's mindless, it expands energy. It's what I like to do. So these are things we can all do to get a grip in the moment. They're somewhat healthy. They don't hurt anything or anybody. Now let's talk about timeout. Timeout can be an emotional punishment for children. As Dr. Otto Weininger once said, the time that children need us the most to deal with their emotional meltdowns is the time we want to be with them the least. And that's oftentimes when we put them in timeout. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we need their timeout more than they do. And that can be scary to kids, and it can be, a lot of kids will not stay in timeout. I had some of them. You put them in their room, you hold the door handle closed, and they're on the other side of the room throwing blocks at the doors and taking things out of their dresser, and nobody is calming down. So timeout is better for you to model it rather than to teach them. Here are some things you might want to consider if you're doing a timeout to punish or a time in to calm down. So it's based on time, tools, person, and place. And a lot of children need a parent or an adult to go with them and help them calm down. We would never say to a child, okay, here's the math book, go to your room and come out when you've learned about addition. But yet we do that with their emotional learnings. We say, go in your room and calm down and come out when you're more calm. But a lot of children can't calm down on their own. They need you to help. And that's what we call a time in. Here are some problems with time out. And I tend to go through these in my book, Discipline Without Distress, because a lot of time out has become a very popular tool ever since we tell parents, well, don't spank. Well, parents feel the need to do something. So the big ones here is it teaches it's a punishment, not a life skill. Kids don't understand why they're in timeout. Usually they know, okay, mom or dad are mad. And it gives negative attention. And the biggest one, I think, is it teaches children to force change in another person instead of modifying themselves. And that is the adult way. When people tend to make us angry, we have to modify ourselves rather than force them to change. So take your time out. Say in the moment, stop, breathe, what do I need? And just breathe. Feel the calm. Take your time out. You can always come back 5-10 minutes later and deal with the situation. Timeout is a positive life skill. Model it to teach it to kids. Don't force them into it. Step 2, get your child calm. Now this is what we call time in. Back to our chip example. Okay, so I come back up. I'm nice and calm now. And now my son's brother, who he shares a room with, looked at all the chips on his carpet too, and they're in a fight. So now I have to calm children down. So I pull them apart. I grab the 4-year-old, and at this point I'm just going to look at what his feelings are. I'm not going to look at the behavior. Now this is not the time you say, clean up those chips or else. There's timing for everything. Right now you're just dealing with your child's emotional needs. Sorry. So again, give them some tools. These same tools they can try too. For example, some children may want to yell in a pillow, or they may want to shake off their feelings, or drum, or get a hug. They're angry too, and they need to be taught ways to calm down. Temper tantrums, very normal for toddlers and preschoolers. You can try and prevent them as they're escalating, but if you can't, move them to a quiet spot if you're out in public and just wait it out. Stay calm yourself. After they peak and they're coming down and they're calmer, give them the words for how they're feeling. Say, you were angry back there when you couldn't have the chips. What are we going to do the next time you want chips before supper? And then you solve the problem. If they tantrum in public, don't worry. Everybody out there has had experience with children, and they're looking at you with empathy, not judgment. There's two types of tantrums. There's a spillover tantrum, usually from too much stimulation, noise, food, just too much excitement. So move them to a quiet place. And then there's the power struggle tantrum where you said no and they're reacting back, which is okay. The best thing you can do there is stay with your no. And that's a very hard part of discipline. Stay with your no. You may have made a bad decision, but stick with it this time. Think next time. You're not the target. Don't worry. Don't take it personally. Parents have to say no. Our job is to help children cope with no's in their life, not to avoid them. And that's a good thing. So young children commonly hit, throw, push, and bite. When you say no, they don't like it, and that's okay. So here's some tools, and here's some more tools. So these are some things that can work especially well for children. Giving them a beanbag chair, an anger tube to breathe in, breathe, hammer their hands, stomp, drum, signal for a hug, draw their feelings, or give them a teething ring for biting. Timing is everything. So teach children when they're calm the tools to use when they're not. So, and that applies for everything in children. Teach when everyone's calm, not in the heat of the moment. And you just have to do this over and over and over and over and over again because children need lots of practice and repetition. Now, step 3 is solve the problem. And although I have 135 tools in my book, Discipline Without Distress, which you can purchase through Scholar's Choice, I can't cover them all here. So I'm just going to go through some of the major ones. Now, back to our chip example. I could have easily given them a spanking and that was it. Done. But what would that have taught them? In this, I got him to help me clean up the chips. And at 4 years old, he can vacuum. He won't do a good job, but he's getting in the habit of doing it. And what that teaches him is it teaches him, for one thing, how to clean. He has that life skill. And it takes longer and requires effort from him. So it teaches him he may think twice before he does that next time. And it gives him positive attention that we do it together. Problem solving is you and me against the problem. It's not you against me. And all simple problem solving is brainstorming needs, coming up with ideas, picking them, and doing it. And problem solving inspires a lot of creativity. I'm not going to talk about this. So just to recap, there's a lot of differences between discipline and punishment. Discipline is to learn, it connects, it's long-term learning for life skills, and it can be very proactive. Punishment is designed to hurt. It disconnects the relationship, and it promotes sneaky behavior like don't get caught, and it's very often reactive. So you want to discipline rather than punish. And the hardest part is just staying with your no. So one question I get from parents is, well, where are they going to learn consequences? And I say to them, everyone else in their world is going to punish them because it's quick and easy. You're building a bond with your child. And this goes for your parenting partner too, who is building their own bond with that child. And you have a vested interest in teaching them problem solving where other people are not going to spend that time. So look at the long-term goals, building that relationship, and staying with your no. Okay, I'm going to just get through a few of these things. There are a few problems. I talked about problems with timeout. There's a few problems with spanking. These are some of the risk factors of spanking. And it's not to say that if you spank, these things are definitely going to happen. What it does say is the risk of these things occurring goes up. You want to parent with optimum health in mind, not just good enough health. Consequences are very popular too. And I struggled with this one personally. And when my children got to about age 10, and they started to realize that, you know what, they don't choose consequences. Parents set them up, and they know. So sometimes they're designed to hurt rather than solve a problem. So people say to me all the time, what's the difference between problem solving and consequences? And I say, well, is it mutually respectful? Is it something you would do to your partner, your friend, your mother-in-law? And it just follows the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have do unto you. So consequences should be respectful, real world, and resolution orientated. That means that they must have a purpose that kids can understand, to make amends, to make restitution, to fix or solve a problem. Getting my son to clean up the chips was solving the problem. And it's something I would expect from anybody else who threw chips on my rug. It's the adult way. Now, as your child grows, you lose control, but what you gain is influence. And that grows the older they get if your relationship is connected. For example, my university age kids, who are, 3 of them were home from university, and we could sit around and chat. And even though they're out of town, my influence still goes a long way. They call me up and they ask for advice. They not always take it, but it goes a long way. My control has left, but my influence lives on. So what to do? Problem solve, don't punish. Now here are some tools for babies. Make sure you fulfill their needs. And now's a good time to learn child development. Find out what is appropriate at each age. Substitution, prevention, distraction, redirection is also very good for babies, just because they don't understand anything, as we talked about in development. So those are good tools to use. And you know, around 6 months they're up crawling, they're starting to touch things, and that's when parents start getting into the hand slapping. Toddler tools, child-proof, make them safe, damage control, redirect them. Here are some more toddler tools. And the good thing about toddlers is the one in the yellow, carry, restrain, and remove. They're little. You can pick them up. You can change things. You have a lot of power and control there where you can move them and redirect them to other things. We're not going to talk. Preschooler tools. So take time in. Help them with their emotional control. Stay with your no. If you said no, stick with it no matter what pushback you get. And start doing problem solving. They're starting to talk, so you can give a little more verbal input. They can give verbal input. You can come up with solutions together. And that skill will last them all through their life. Here's some additional preschooler tools. And these are just little tips and tricks from moms and dads and teachers who found they're helpful for that stage. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's some good ones there. And over age 4, as they start to talk, give them more choices, and problem solving is going to be your main tool. Now, school agers and teens, I have a lot of ideas for tools in my book. So as much as you can, stop grounding in consequences and start connecting with your school agers and teens. And the best discipline tool ever is often a hug, because it breaks the impasse. It gets you connected and started from a point of compassion and love. And it conveys unconditional love to start talking. So just remember to recap, separate your anger from your discipline, make much better choices. Get yourself calm, time out. Get your child calm, time in. Solve the problem. I want to thank you for sharing your evening with me tonight, and I'm going to open it up to questions, and if I don't get to them, like Reagan said, I would get to them on the blog later on. I want to thank Reagan for inviting me on to Scholars Choice webinar platform, and we do additional webinar topics for children of all ages at professionalparenting.ca if you're interested. They're for children 0 to 25 because your knowledge should grow. Every parent has challenges. Every parent. Even parenting experts have challenges. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to find out more information because they don't come with owner's manuals. And it's worth it to build a lifelong relationship with your children. So thank you, and remember, relationship involves two people. Enjoy your children.
All right, amazing, Judy. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We already have so much feedback and questions just pouring in right now. So I'm just going to start handing some off to you for as much time as we have allotted, and then we will get to the rest at a later date.
Okay, sounds good.
Now, okay, there are so many. So we'll start off with, actually, concerning your book, we have an audience member asking, is there a lot of information in your book on high need and spirited children as well?
Yes, I have 3 spirited children, all the odd-numbered ones. The first, the third, and the last. And with spirited children, conventional discipline techniques do not work. They're the ones that you spank and they look at you and they say, that didn't hurt. Or, you put them in timeout and they're breaking down the door. Or you ground them and they're going out the window. So, yes, my book was written for spirited children in mind just because I had them. And what it is it's a lot of tips from parents in my groups and classes over the years. And we need to share information on how do you handle these things with respect, without punishment, but in a way you feel good about, and it teaches the child. So yes, definitely lots of tips for that.
Perfect. All right, we will move on to the next one. This is a great question. An audience member says that she is a single mother of a 6-year-old girl, and she tends to, the 6-year-old tends to give her the hardest time and not listen to her, but behaves a lot better for her dad or with other family members when they babysit, which is really frustrating because she's with her 90% of the time. So is this normal in your opinion because she's the more parent that is involved more?
That's a very normal experience that a lot of parents share. And basically, in a way, your daughter that expresses her anger in front of you is handing you a gift. She's saying that I feel safe with you, I feel comfortable, I feel I can let down my hair and be who I am. And usually children feel that with the parent that they spend the most time with. And it's not an indication of parenting quality. It's just some parents, some children feel more safer with some parents that they're okay with meeting their emotional needs. And it switches too at later time. Maybe when the daughter is a teenager, she may feel more comfortable going to her dad for some things and going to her mom for other things. But take that as a sign of your child feels safe and attached to you. And it doesn't feel great when you're getting the onslaught, believe me. But it's going to turn around, and she's going to feel safe enough with you later to have conversations about anything. So it's a good thing. Be patient.
Wonderful. So the next question is from an audience member that asks, my child refuses to accept responsibility for his actions and won't say sorry to a parent, sibling, or friend for anything. How do you begin to deal with that problem?
That's a common one. When it could be a matter of timing, because when we want our kids to say sorry, we recognize the social situation demands it. Like people are watching, they're expecting the social bandage. And then we're on a spot because we're in a power struggle with our kids because we said you need to say sorry and they won't do it. So what we need to do is deal with the other people first and say, look, he doesn't have the words right now to say sorry, but I'll deal with it. And just assure them you're going to deal with it. That's all they want. They want to know that you're going to deal with it. And then you could apologize to them on his behalf, and that way you're showing the child this is how you make social amends. And then you take your child off and you deal with it, and then you get your child calm. Because very often we want them to apologize when they're still in the heat of anger and they're not ready, or they don't have the words, or they don't want to say the words. But we need to allow them space to apologize in their own way, and oftentimes it's later. So getting in a power struggle in the heat of the moment doesn't work. But timing is everything. Try it a little later. Like, just let go, stand back, get out of the power struggle because you're the adult. You can do that. You have the control. And then still come back to the issue and address it on a different time frame.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll move to the next one. We have an audience member asking, when is timeout, when does it begin to be appropriate? Their son is almost 20 months old and seems to understand the concept of it, but is that too young? They do it currently for 1.5 minutes.
Well, in our provincial health organization, timeout's not recommended until age 3. And even then, it should be a calming down type of tool. It shouldn't be a punishment jail time. So he may need you to go with him, but wait until 3 and that they have a certain amount of self-control to start calming down with you. And ask your child. They may need you with them to help them, coach them how to breathe, how to just get rid of their anger in their ways. So 20 months is too young.
It is. Okay, good. Now we have the next question. I'm just going to skip through a few of them. Actually, someone asked as well, in concerns to the age being too young and everything. You mentioned there was a certain point with your son that you decided to do the non-punishment technique.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're asking, is there a certain age, is it age 3 as well, that should begin?
I would say my ideal was I wish I didn't punish any of my children, but you know, our first child's our guinea pig and we try everything, and then we're a different parent with each child. And so I didn't punish my last 3 at all. So I never even started. When they were young, I would just redirect and teach, redirect, keep them safe. And then as they got older, like around age 3, 4, they can talk more, and then we problem solve. And that was it. Even through the teen years, we problem solved. I didn't take away their cell phones, their computers. I didn't ground them. Didn't need to. We'd talk and work things out, called conflict resolution. And you can start problem solving with a 2-year-old. It's very primitive, but you come up with 2 choices and pick which one works for both of you. It's negotiation is a great skill that kids need to learn for future relationships. And I don't know why it's an 11-letter word in parenting, because that's what they need for long-term life skills, is how to negotiate. They learn punishment and they bring that to their future relationships, and it doesn't get them very far. So you can start problem solving from age 2 on.
Absolutely, perfect. Now we have the next audience member asking, this is probably something very common as well, what is an effective non-punishment tool for a child that refuses to eat? that is picky about their food?
In picky eating, I'm assuming the child's probably under 6 and parent can still control what food is placed out there. But the parent decides what, when, and where. So they decide what foods to serve, when the food is served, and it should be served every 2 hours, snacks and meals, and where. And the child decides if they're going to eat and how much they're going to eat. And that's pretty standard health information now across Canada, is what we call the feeding relationship. So if children don't eat, it's them getting to know their satiety levels, and we don't want to punish them for that. And if we serve food every 2 hours, they won't go hungry. But it takes that power struggle away from getting them to eat. Their job is to decide what food goes in.
Oh, this is a great question. Julie asks, any suggestions on dealing with family members who do not necessarily agree with your positive parenting styles?
Yes, just there are some things you can say to them. You can say, oh, well, my doctor recommended this. Because a lot of older people, they respect doctors' opinions, and if the doctor said it, well, it must be good, right? Or you can say, well, this is what works for our family. Or, you know, just look at their comments as they're coming from love and concern. But you can just say thanks and then decide not to you know, take it to heart or anything. But I usually say to people, well, you know, if you want to, we know more about brains now, we know about how brains work, and this is what I've read is good for brain development. And that's usually one they can argue with. But again, you just have to, in parenting, you need a thick skin. Believe me, you're going to get criticized no matter what you do. So you just have to let the comments bounce off and find your support system. There's a community for every type of parenting on the internet. Find it, stick with it if you're feeling unwaverly, and just have confidence that your kids are going to turn out wonderful.
Great. Now, unfortunately, we are just winding down to the end of our webinar here, and there are so many more questions pouring in. Everybody's definitely appreciating this great advice, Judy. But
Great, thanks.
we are, as we mentioned before, I'm going to take these questions that have yet to be addressed, and I will pass them on to Judy, where she will be able to address them, and we will post it in about 2 weeks' time with all of her professional answers. So at this point, we're just quickly going to do our draw for our $100 Scholar's Choice gift card. Just to be in compliance, this draw is open to Canadians in provinces except Quebec, unfortunately. And there will be a mandatory skill testing question to follow if I do select your name. And if you are the lucky winner, I will record your email address and send you a follow-up with the prize waiver sheet. So even if you do hear your name, if you don't mind just acknowledging that you did hear it in the question box, that would be great. And our winner this evening for the $100 Scholar's Choice gift card is Chloe Kerr. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Chloe Kerr. If you have heard this, if you don't mind just responding. Perfect, you heard. Awesome. Congratulations. Now, Judy, thank you so much for being on the call. I know that you listed all of your personal information already, the parenting at professionalparenting.ca, and your email address that you can be contacted at if necessary.
Sure.
Is that the proper information that they should contact you at?
Sure. Yes, or yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I'm there too. So yes, and thank you for letting me share tonight, and thanks to everyone out there for sharing your evening with us.
Absolutely. So this last slide that you're just showing now, This is for everybody to check out Scholars Choice on Twitter or on Facebook. There's also the online store as well at www.scholarschoice.ca. Now, to purchase Judy's book, the link that is right underneath the online store is how you will get to that. So we will leave this up for a couple minutes here. That'll direct you right there. Now that this book is packed with 135 tools concerning this exact topic, and it's a must-read for everybody looking to learn more about peaceful parenting. So if you did find this webinar valuable as well, and you do want to have access to it again, in a week's time, on Tuesday, July 2nd, it will be available at community.scholarschoice.ca in a YouTube video format within a blog. So everybody can go through it again and access all those slides that they wanted to take notes on. And on that note, we will wrap up the evening. Thank you so much, Judy, and to everybody in the audience. We hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected.